Because it's almost more than I can take in. How were police alerted to this?
Yeah, it's pretty unimaginable what happened to her, Nancy. Investigators say a passerby saw Jessica apparently walking on the side of the road. She was on fire. By all accounts, she was still conscious.
Wait. Did you just say she was walking? Walking while on fire on the side of the road? How did she have the wherewithal to do that, Daniel?
I spoke with her sister. Her sister told me that the passerby said she was still conscious. She was walking alongside the road. Her burning car was not too far from her. This was all kind of in a wooded area in Cortland.
Everyone, let's take a look at the last known video, the last images of Jessica, and we are joined by her sister, Amanda. This is video just before Jessica is burned, essentially alive. One of the most horrific and painful deaths imaginable. There she is, a teen girl stopping for gas, no idea what is about to occur. She waves or speaks to somebody, steps over, and here she goes. This is just moments before her body is engulfed in flames. There she is going into the store. It's only moments after this. Someone intentionally douses her skin and clothing with lighter fluid and sets her ablaze. To Dr. Tim Gallagher, a medical examiner joining me out of Daytona Beach, this is one of the most painful and horrific deaths possible. Why inflict this on a teen girl who's never hurt anybody? Doctor, what does her death entail? Look at her car.
Well, you know, this death is a very personal attack on her. Someone had to get very close to her. It had to be somebody that could have possibly known her in order for them to get this close to pour the fluid on her.
You know, another thing, Dr. Gallagher, and let me confirm this with Steve Taylor, co-host of Gulf Coast Mornings, is it true that this little girl has lighter fluid up her nose and down her throat?
Yes, Nancy, that seems to be what it is. In fact, the Panola County Sheriff, Dennis Darby, is saying that Jessica had been doused with lighter fluid, set on fire, not just her throat, but also her nose and the rest of her body. She was also knocked unconscious and set afire, and her father had noticed also that she had a huge gash on the top of her head. It appears that Jessica may have been knocked out, unconscious, set afire, but as has been said, they found her walking along the highway on fire, not far from where her car was also ablaze.
Before we name the prime suspects of the Jessica Chambers case, we want to share with you the reasoning behind the conclusion. Our investigation begins at the scene of the crime because it gives us every vital clue needed to break this case. First off, thanks to the courage and strength of Jessica Chambers, we were able to get a name of the killer. And without that information, any hope of catching the killer would have been next to impossible.
Bibb says the investigator mentioned to him Chambers has said the name Derek or Eric, and that's why the investigator came to his home. I tracked down this man, 31-year-old Derek Turner, just hours after he was released from jail Wednesday, where he was questioned about Jessica Chambers.
According to the district attorney and to another suspect in the case, this crime was sexual in nature. DNA was recovered from the victim, and that DNA belongs to the killer still at large.
I took a lie detector test. I took a swab test.
Forensics from the crime scene also tells us that the assault on Jessica Chambers was extremely violent and that an accelerant was used to destroy evidence at the scene. The totality of this information from the crime scene leaves us with two possible motives: rape or revenge. Investigators have confirmed that Jessica arrived at the scene around 7:30 p.m., with the last known location of Jessica before the crime scene being a quote-unquote party that occurred a very short distance away in Cortland, with witnesses placing her at the party at around 6:30 p.m.
There was a party going on, and she was there. When she left the party, that's when it happened to her. When she left the party, that's when it happened to her.
Notice how she slips up during this interview and says them before correcting herself to say her.
There was a party going on, and she was there. When she left the party, that's when it happened to her. When she left the party, that's when it happened to her.
This is an important fact because there are only a handful of reasons why Jessica would have went to that crime scene in the first place. Had it been purely for intimacy with a boyfriend, she would have said that Jessica left with a boyfriend or left alone, but Miss Wilkinson said them, implying the possibility of a group. Furthermore, had Jessica left for reasons of intimacy, there would have been a call or a message on her phone saying, "I'm on my way," or "see you soon," and there would have been an arrest soon after the crime. But since there was no arrest, that means there was no message, no trace to the suspect. Therefore, the decision to go to the scene of the crime must have been arranged in person before the crime actually took place. Given that Jessica Chambers left with a group of individuals, a group that Miss Wilkinson has not named, the only reasonable explanation is that the arrangements that led to the brutal murder of Jessica Chambers were made in person at that party. She was last seen leaving the party with a group of people, and so those people were the last ones to see her alive. To put this plainly, somebody at this party must have been like, "Hey girl, let's go to that chill spot outside of town and get high. We ain't got enough for all these people out here, so let's just leave and do our thing." Now this is where the story gets murky, ladies and gentlemen. Jessica's history with weed and the like is no secret, and it's no different than most people her age. The question we need to be asking here is what kind of scenario leads to a crime scene like the one we saw in Cortland? Investigators have recently been quoted as saying this will probably boil down to a debt of $500 or something like that, which means this was an ambush related to a debt or to a drug deal gone wrong. Regardless of the circumstances, this motive gives us new insight into the profile of the perp, and it means that the person that we're looking for is most likely a sexually obsessed, hyper-aggressive gangbanger named Derek, who has a "don't mess with my money or you'll get dealt with" type of personality. Another factor is, of course, that this unsub has yet to be identified by the police, otherwise they would have arrested him by now. So with this profile in mind, our search began.
It is the shocking convenience store surveillance video WMC Action News 5 uncovered that showed some of Jessica Chambers' final moments. In this video, we saw a man near her with a container for gasoline, and a woman waved off-screen to Jessica. Tonight, for the first time, those two people are speaking with WMC Action News 5's Michael Clark exclusively.
This is Cassandra Market. She goes by Sandy. You won't see her in the video, but instead Jessica Chambers. She stops in her tracks and walks off to talk to someone.
It's me. I asked her for a cigarette.
Market says the 19-year-old wasn't smoking her flavor. She knows Jessica and says she's been questioned by investigators. She tells me she had nothing to do with Jessica's murder and is telling deputies the same thing.
Told them I'm willing to take the lab to take the test.
Also in the video, a man pumps gasoline into a jug about an hour and a half before she was found badly burned on a nearby road.
I just want to get my name clear.
Where John Byer says he was filling up this generator. He still has the container he used to fill it.
I didn't notice anything until I came out the stove and got the gas and walked away, and I looked up. I seen Jessica.
Byer says he knows Jessica and is appalled by what happened to her, but he says he has nothing to do with it. He says he walked off, got into Sandy's car, and went home before Jessica Chambers was killed.
I got in the car, and we left. That's the last time I seen her.
Here we just saw a clip of a woman named Sandy Market. It's worth noting that during that interview, she used a fake name. Her real name is Sandra Rudd, and her entire story there is actually fake, as was the account of Gas Can Man Brejuan. We won't have time to cover Sandy Market today in much detail, but it turns out that Sandy is the aunt of Brian Rudd, Jessica's ex-boyfriend. As for Brejuan, at the time of these events, he was dating a girl named Tipu Latrice, whose real name is actually Tiana Rudd, a cousin to Brian Rudd. So what we know here is that all these people knew Jessica Chambers extremely well, and given the shadiness of their circumstances, we focused our efforts on them, scanning their social media chatter for the name Derek. Nothing overly complex, but after tireless work from all the interested net citizens involved, we have been able to match a suspect to our working profile. Case and point. In this thread of conversation here, Tiana Tipu Rudd and Brejuan Gas Can Byers were having it out with a girl named Nene Superthick Robinson, and they clearly mentioned a name Derek during a comeback in a heated exchange. You gotta love emotions. So we started looking into every Derek on Nene's super thick friend list until we found ourselves a Derek that matched every criteria of our profile. Therefore, and without further ado, meet Mr. Derek Young, who hails from Senatobia, which is about 30 miles away from the scene of the crime. This location, Senatobia, is why investigators failed to find the Derek they were looking for. Senatobia is about 5 towns away up the highway, or about 35 miles away from Cortland. The trick for investigators here will be to link Mr. Young back to Jessica Chambers' entourage, namely Brejuan. I'm filling up a gas can on the same video where the victim appears. Now, we're going to help investigators out and get into the actual link between Brejuan and Mr. Young. But before that, here are some interesting yet incriminating facts. There were no entries on Brejuan's Facebook page until about 3 weeks after the crime. And just about the first thing he posts is this: waiting to exhale, with an image of a woman and a burning car behind her. Truly tasteless. As for Mr. Young, his most infamous entry would have to be this: when your whole squad done hit the pussy, but you go last so you slit try to cuff her. An obvious reference to gang rape and murder, with 58 people liking that comment, might I add. As it turns out, these jokers, Mr. Byers and Mr. Young, were clever enough not to link each other directly through Facebook. But by cross-referencing their contacts, we did find the missing links. Meet young Merck. Also most likely to be associated with the murder of Jessica Chambers, he is friends with both Brejuan and Derek Young. The term Merck, if you recall, is slang for to kill somebody. I'm gonna murk you, like a mercenary. So yeah, that's Mr. Merck. And then there's LaWanda Key. LaWanda Key has 2 Facebook profiles. They're essentially the same name with the same pictures on each account. One of the accounts is friends with Brejuan and the other account is friends with Derek Young. Pretty tricky flying under the radar tactics, if you ask me. But this seriously implies that they were trying to hide the link. So with young Merck, LaWanda Key, and Nene Super Thick Robinson, that makes at least 3 links we could find between Derek Young and Brejuan Byers. And if you take into account the content of Mr. Young's profile, this is some serious gang activity. Just look at that phone. 20 years old with all that cash. That can't be legit. Now, what I would like to see here is a link between Charlotte Wilkinson, the obvious facilitator to the ambush, and the Derek Young gang. Unfortunately, Shasha has completely disappeared from social media. However, we were able to link her through Facebook to Super Thick Johnson, no relation, in Senatobia, the hometown of Derek Young.
Here's what these last 2 stories really mean. This is textbook homicide detective for how you break a big homicide case. You find the witnesses. You don't know what they know. You kind of think you know what they know, but you don't really know what they know. Maybe you heard about it secondhand. You find the witnesses. You find a witness. You arrest them. In this case, you arrest 17 of them. And you start turning up the pressure. You remind them of how much time they're going to spend in jail if they don't crack. Very famous murder case not too far where I'm making this video now, the Capano-Healy case. They arrested Capano's brother for all sorts of nasty business, totally unrelated to the murder that Capano is later convicted of. They said, listen, you're going to testify about what happened that day and your involvement in it, or you're going to go to prison for a long time and you're not going to see your kids. Boom. Took about a minute for him to figure out what he really wanted to do. That's what's happening here. The economists even have a name for this. They call it the prisoner's dilemma. When you're a prisoner, they use it to talk about the behavior of people that are engaged in a monopoly, right? It's like at some point, somebody has to kind of crack first. Well, that's what this is. This is the prisoner's dilemma. They're really trying to crack some witnesses, find out what happened to Jessica. And when the guy says, yeah, we're going to crack this through technology, that means they're going to keep looking at phone records, I can't imagine there's any unturned, but they're just going to keep digging and digging and digging, getting more and more warrants. And the family thinks they're pretty close to charging somebody with murder. I think the cops are pretty certain. One of the 17 people they arrested today is going to make that happen a lot faster. might turn out to be like one of the worst cases of black-on-white, black mob violence we've talked about in a long time. So you guys keep me posted, and I'll keep you posted. This is Colin Flaherty, author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Talk to you.